You're watching CW Montana. This is the MTN 9 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us on your Thursday. I'm Jeanelle Slade. Across the state tonight, Christmas coming early for one Montana family after a stolen dog is found more than 2,000 miles away. Plus, the Great Falls community comes together tonight to remember a 5-year-old allegedly beat to death by his parents. But first, a newly developed settlement would bring a permanent solution to a decades-old tribal water rights dispute in western Montana in a deal worth upwards of $2 billion. Well, that settlement, which forms the framework of a new agreement with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, would replace the pending Flathead Water Compact. MTN's Dennis Bragg has those details.
The agreement came today after recent statements from Interior Secretary David Bernhardt and Attorney General William Barr giving new indications of movement in the dispute, which had been stalled at the federal level for the past 4 years. Daines tells MTN News the agreement contains multiple elements to resolve the dispute over tribal water claims dating all the way back to the Hellgate Treaty of the 1850s.
Yeah, well, let me say this, Dennis, that today is a very important step, because we have reached a historic compromise on what has been a century-old dispute in Montana. And I've been working on this for years to reach a new agreement that would address my concerns and those of many others who've long opposed some of these other proposals. These have been tough and hard negotiations. I very much appreciate the concessions the tribe has been willing to make to get us to this point. This new framework, which I'm going to be introducing next week, will protect the water rights of all Montanans.
Under the settlement, Daines says the tribe would relinquish 97% of water rights claims with prejudice, meaning the dispute couldn't be revived through litigation at a later date. The remaining rights would be co-owned with the state of Montana, with a fraction reserved for fisheries and outdoor recreation. Additionally, this settlement would give CSKT $1.9 billion in damages, providing hundreds of millions of dollars to rehabilitate the Flathead Indian Irrigation Project and $10 million for road and infrastructure improvements in Lake and Sanders counties. The settlement also confirms Montana's constitutional claims on water and preserves the power of the water court to resolve disputes. Daines tells us the settlement would avoid an estimated $400 million over alternative proposals, a step he says gives all water users across Montana protection and certainty.
It is. It's a framework that's agreed to by the tribe as well. So it's the tribe agreement with this framework so important here, as well as many stakeholders across Montana. But it's time that we put this century-old dispute in Montana to bed.
Daines says if the settlement is approved, it wouldn't require further consideration by the legislature. In Missoula, Dennis Bragg, MTN News.
Thanks, Dennis. And Tribal Chair Ron Trahan released a statement praising the settlement, saying, quote, "This will work and get the job done." Now, Senator Jon Tester, who made the first attempt to get the compact through Congress in 2016, also praising the development and its bipartisan support. Daines says he'll work with Tester to explain the act when legislation is introduced next week. Well, some big news for eastern Montana today as the Colstrip Power Plant signs a renewed supply agreement. That agreement is between Northwestern Energy and the Rosebud mine, which emerged from Chapter 11 bankruptcy earlier this year. Now, Northwestern Energy is just one of 6 owners of the plant, and today announced a 6-year deal with the mine for units 3 and 4. The new deal will take effect on January 1st and run through the end of 2025. While this deal will keep units 3 and 4 running for now, other co-owners of the plant say they will cut investments as early as 2025 with a targeted shutdown of 2027. Units 1 and 2 are slated to close by the end of this month. Now, also tonight, Northwestern Energy has mapped out a plan to acquire hundreds of megawatts of additional power here in Montana. That plan gets a public hearing next week, and it's not without controversy. Tonight, MTN's Mike Dennison tells us what's in that plan and why it faces criticism.
Northwestern Energy already generates at least half the electricity it needs to serve its 370,000 Montana customers, and at peak consumption times buys the rest on the open market. But the company's plan says that regional market will tighten in the near future, and that Northwestern wants to buy or build 750 megawatts of its own generation in the next 5 years, twice as much as it has now.
The biggest takeaway from Northwestern's perspective on what this plan sets forth is the critical need that our portfolio has, and that need is not for intermittent types of generation, but what we call 24/7 generation that we can turn on and off according to the portfolio's needs.
The initial plan said that need is best met by new natural gas-fired power plants. Now, after some public criticism of the plan, Northwestern says it will ask for bids on any source of power, including wind, solar, pump storage, energy efficiency, or natural gas.
We're now going out for the competitive solicitation to let the market provide the actual data.
But Brian Fady of the Montana Environmental Information Center in Helena believes the initial plan underestimated the potential cost of natural gas-fired plants. And he worries that Northwestern is still predisposed to favor gas plants over cleaner and perhaps cheaper energy.
The gas plants that Northwestern seems to want to build, those are an economic risk for our future. And wind and solar, they don't have that same economic risk because they have no fuel cost.
He also notes the plan assumes coal-fired power from Colstrip will continue for the next 20 years.
That's a big risk to consumers if you're not mapping out what would happen if that plant does close in the next 20 years, and how should the utility respond in a least cost way.
Hines says Northwestern believes part of Colstrip can continue for another 20 years, and that without it, even more new plants would have to be built at great expense. He also isn't sure whether renewable power projects, wind or solar, can provide the type of power needed on a consistent basis.
I need to be able to feel comfortable that we have power available when it's 40 below zero and people are relying on electricity to heat their homes.
The plan goes before the Public Service Commission for a hearing on Monday. As explained by Commissioner Roger Koopman of Bozeman, the PSC can't change the plan, but can act as a sounding board for the public and provide its own insight.
I think sometimes utilities can kind of get onto a track. They get committed to a certain approach, and it's good for them to hear from other minds that have a lot to say and think as well.
Something else the plan doesn't include. What will be the cost of these new plans to ratepayers? That comes later, when Northwestern submits the actual projects to the PSC for its review and approval. In Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
And Mike tells us Northwestern plans to begin the bidding process for new plants or resources within the next 2 months. Well, major changes are coming to mental health services in Lewis and Clark County after a key provider says it's leaving. For about 5 years, Western Montana Mental Health Center has provided a variety of services in the Helena area, including behavioral health specialists in the county detention center and a crisis response team. But last month, Lewis and Clark County leaders announced they want to hire their own specialists at the detention center, and they opened up contract proposals for the crisis response team. Now, these moves caused Western leaders to reevaluate their operation in Lewis and Clark County, and the company is now pulling out.
Understand that the service that we were providing was very much needed in this community, and we hope to work with other providers and work with the county to create a transition plan to limit any disruption in service.
Now, Western Montana Health currently has 22 employees in the area, and leaders say they are working to find other positions for them. Well, it's been 2 weeks since the passing of a 5-year-old Montana boy whose horrific murder rocked the state. This evening, the Great Falls community celebrated and reflected on the young life of Tony Renova. People came together in their grief and to gain insight about how to stop child abuse like this. More than 100 came out in Tony's honor, watching the story of his life unfold on screen.
It continues to bring hope. This is a very giving community. This is a very cohesive community. At moments like these, we can either choose to let it create some discord, or we can come together and look at ways that we can continue to grow and improve, to continue to provide resources to families and children that need it, and to grow together from it.
Now, weeks before an Oregon toddler vanished and was then found dead in northwest Montana, Oregon child welfare workers said they had no reason to believe the 2-year-old was in danger. But now the agency admits it performed an incomplete investigation. Now, the parents of Aiden Salcido fled Oregon from Montana in mid-June to avoid jail time for burglary. On July 25th, Hannah Janik and Danielle Salcido were found dead after a traffic stop in Kalispell. Salcido apparently shot Janik in the head and then killed himself. Just days later, the child was found deceased at a campground from an apparent gunshot wound. In a new report, the Oregon Department of Human Services says it received numerous concerns of domestic violence, including Salcido threatening the mother with a gun. but a state supervisor had signed off on the investigation into Aiden's well-being as unfounded. The state child welfare agency now acknowledges workers did not fully assess the ongoing violence. Well, a 6-year-old Whitefish girl hit by a car while getting off her school bus last month remains in critical condition, but now she is breathing on her own. This, as a local athletics store is coming to her family's aid. Universal Athletics in Kalispell is attempting to help with the cost of medical bills by creating Jordana Strong shirts. Now, the proceeds will go directly to the Hubble family. A store sales rep says the business has already sold more than 100 articles of Jordana spirit wear. The plan is to present the Hubble family a check before Christmas.
You can use that money to help with whatever needs, either medical bills or whatever. It's Christmas time, and money's never a plenty at Christmas time, no matter who you are. So this would be something to help them out.
Now, Jordana Strong clothing can be purchased online through Universal Athletics Kalispell website and picked up at the Kalispell location, or if outside the Flathead Valley, it can be shipped to your home. Well, the Arlene man charged with 2 shootings in March that left 1 man dead and critically wounded 3 others, including a Montana Highway Patrol trooper, is set to go to trial next year. Jonathan Burch's trial set for August 17, 2020 in Missoula District Court. Burch is accused of killing Shelley Hayes and wounding Casey Blanchard and his mother Julie. Hours later, Burch is accused of ambushing Trooper Wade Palmer, shooting him several times in the head, leaving Palmer with a traumatic brain injury. Casey's mother, Julie, died from her injuries in June. Now, right now, Burch is charged with 1 count of deliberate homicide and 3 counts of attempted deliberate homicide. Prosecutors are reviewing Julie Blanchard's coroner's report before amending those charges. Well, some bombshell testimony out of Bozeman today. The deliberate homicide trial for Joseph Paul DeWise. That testimony came from DeWise's own son. DeWise is accused of killing his wife Lauren and critically injuring her roommate back in 2018. Well, today Joseph DeWise Jr. sat before his father and recounted weeks of abuse between his mom and stepmom and dad. He says his father drove him to where Lauren was staying and told him to wear gloves and a mask. Joe Jr. testified they broke in, entered the first bedroom, and shot Lauren's roommate, Ashley Van Hemert, then moved to the next bedroom where he shot and killed Lauren. Joe Jr. says once home, his father told him to remove his clothes and boots, take a shower, and dispose of ammunition. Today is Menton Day. It's a day celebrated by U.S. Army Special Forces for the decommissioning of the 1st Special Services Force, which was based out of Fort Harrison in Helena. 75 years ago, the Devil's Brigade was deactivated in Menton, France. The unique joint Canadian-American top-secret force was trained in small teams and earned a reputation of carrying out missions that were considered impossible. In their 251 days of combat, the Devil's Brigade never failed a mission, but its victories came at a heavy toll. The force suffered more than 2,300 casualties. A memorial was erected in Helena at Memorial Park on Last Chance Gulch to honor the sacrifices of those men. Well, still to come on the MTN statewide news, it's no movie, but this dog is homeward bound after tragedy turns into a miracle. But first, how's the weather looking, Ed?
We're already tracking the next weather system starting to move into the Pacific Northwest, Jeanelle. We'll let you know the timing of that system and how much snow we can expect in just a few minutes.